$550 million sounds like the end of every problem you've ever had. It isn't. It's the start of a math problem almost no winner sees coming, and the number that actually hits your account is less than half of what's printed on that giant check. Here's the ladder, plain and simple. Take the lump sum instead of the annuity, and $550 million shrinks to roughly $290 million before taxes even touch it. Federal withholding takes 24% immediately, more when you file. State tax, depending on where you live, can take another 5 to 10% on top of that. By the time the dust settles, you're sitting somewhere between $160 and $180 million. Still an unthinkable number. Still not the number on the billboard. Now put that next to the median American household, living on around $44,000 a year. The winner just jumped roughly 4,000 years ahead of where they started in a single afternoon. That gap is why this story matters at all. But here's what never makes the news segment. The single biggest predictor of whether that money survives 5 years has nothing to do with the size of the jackpot. It comes down to one decision. Did the winner tell anyone? Say it out loud and you invite 11, 20, 40 people into your bank account before you've even cashed the check. Say nothing and you buy yourself the one thing money can't purchase after the fact. Time to think. That's the real thesis here. The jackpot isn't the prize. Silence is. So how does staying quiet actually change the outcome, mathematically and psychologically? That's what almost nobody explains, and it's exactly where we're headed next. Here's the mechanism nobody breaks down, and it isn't emotional, it's structural. The moment a winner goes public, they trigger what researchers call the social tax, and it behaves like compound interest running in reverse, against you. Start with the math. Say word gets out and 40 people in your orbit each ask for an average of $12,500, a mix of loans, gifts, and investments in a cousin's idea. That's $500,000 gone before you've picked a financial advisor. Now add the requests you say yes to out of guilt, the ones that don't stay at $12,500. Attorneys who work with lottery winners put that number closer to $60,000 per relationship, once just this once becomes a pattern. Here's the twist that makes it worse. Every dollar you hand out isn't just gone. It's gone at the exact moment it had the most time to grow. $100,000 given away in year one, instead of invested at a conservative 7%, is worth roughly $760,000 30 years later. You're not just losing the gift, you're losing the future version of the gift. Zoom out and the pattern holds nationally. Multiple long-term studies on lottery winners put the 5 to 7 year money gone rate somewhere between a quarter and a third of all large winners. Not because they made reckless investments, because they were generous with a target already on their back. The bank isn't thinking about your next 30 years. Neither is the friend with the business plan or the relative who resurfaces out of nowhere. They're thinking about your next 30 days. Let's slow down for a second, because the numbers only mean something once you put a face on them. Meet Danny. 41, works logistics for a regional trucking company, $47,000 a year, wife and 2 kids, a mortgage he's 4 years from paying off. He's bought the same 6 numbers every Tuesday on his lunch break for 6 years. This is the Tuesday it hits. Danny does the smart thing first. He doesn't post, he doesn't call his brother, he signs the ticket, photographs it, locks it in a drawer, and calls a lawyer before he calls his mother. He's careful, he's doing everything right. Then, 3 weeks in, at his cousin's barbecue, one sentence slips out after 2 beers. By Monday, his phone has 41 unread texts. By the following month, he's loaned out $140,000. 3 people aren't speaking to him because he said no to a 4th request, and he's spending more hours managing relationships than he ever spent managing a paycheck. The zero that was supposed to disappear from his life, his disposable income, just gets replaced by a different kind of zero, emotional bandwidth. You're probably already forming the objection. I'd handle it differently. I have boundaries. My family isn't like that. Fair. But financial therapists who specialize in sudden wealth put the number of winners who report feeling unable to say no at over 60%, even among people who describe themselves beforehand as private, disciplined, firm. The pressure doesn't test what you believe. It tests who you love, and that's exactly where discipline gets hardest to hold on to. Danny isn't foolish. He's ordinary, dropped into a system built to extract from generosity. The villain in this story was never Danny. It was never his cousin either. It was the exposure itself. So what's the boring alternative that actually works? Silence, structure, and a delay, in that order. Before you sign anything, before you tell a single soul, you set up a trust, sometimes anonymous depending on your state, and let it claim's attorney's name sit on the paperwork instead of yours. That decision costs a few $1,000s in legal fees. Compare that to the 6 figures Danny lost in month 1 alone. Run that gap forward, a few thousand in setup costs versus $140,000 in unstructured giving.
Invested instead at 7% over 20 years, that $140,000 becomes roughly $540,000. Over 30 years, north of $1 million. One conversation Danny didn't have at that barbecue is worth, in today's terms, a house his kids never have to save for. And notice who actually profits when a winner goes public fast. The outlet that runs the name in the photo, the relatives who resurface with a business plan, the advisor who shows up uninvited within a week of the news breaking. Everyone in that chain gets paid the moment your name goes public. The only person who doesn't automatically benefit from your visibility is you. So here's the actual next step, and it costs nothing. If you ever hold a winning ticket, or honestly, if you ever come into any sudden money, sit down before you speak. Call a lawyer before calling family. Let the paperwork protect you before your instincts try to. Now, the honest exception, if your state legally requires public disclosure or your family situation is genuinely low conflict, some of this risk shrinks. Not everyone is Danny. But for most people, the bravest thing you'll ever do with money isn't spending it, and it isn't investing it either. It's staying quiet long enough to think clearly in a culture that expects you to announce everything the second it happens.
Stay ahead of the market with KeyPoint Invest.